Good day, good afternoon, good morning, good night. Hello. I am very pleased to be able to spend some time with the Howard University community, you. I think this is the first time I'm ever actually going to be engaging with the community at large. So this is a very special day for me. Let me just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Daryl Joseph, and I am based in Trinidad and Tobago in the Southern Caribbean. My professional training is in the area of counseling psychology and employee assistance programs. In Trinidad, I own my consulting firm, Josal Consulting, and we provide employee assistance program services to companies in Trinidad as well as the Caribbean. And we've been doing so for about 15 years now. Internationally, I am involved with the Professional Association for Employee Assistance Professionals. I like to use the acronym EAPA, EAPA, and I am actually the current president of the association. Our headquarters are in Arlington, Virginia, which is not very far away from Howard. I have been involved with them since 2008, and through a sequence of volunteer activities, starting off with being on a committee, then being nominated to the board of directors, and then last year being elected to be the president of the board of directors, I have given back, and happily so, to the employee assistance community. So the workplace, productivity, the impact of the workplace on employees, even the impact of employees on one another, the impact of the home and the community and the environment on the employee, and how all of these impacts dovetail and affect productivity. That is the area, the domain within which I regularly operate. I am also happy to say that I have been on the board of visitors of the School of Social Work at Howard for, I think, the last 2 to 3 years. I'm having fun, so I can't remember how much time it is. But I was very, very, very honored to have been asked to join some time ago. And I enjoy the fact that I am able to give something back to what has always been a community that I have respected quite a deal through this board appointment. In case anyone is wondering, I am not a graduate of Howard University. However, I have been quietly envious of my colleagues and friends who have attended Howard over the years. Some of the persons that I would be familiar with and who may be familiar with me, I'll just call 2 names for you because that's not why we're here today. But Mr. Shaka Hislop, who is currently a sports announcer with ESPN, and a gentleman that you're supposed to know by the name of Dr. Wayne Frederick. They were schoolmates of mine in high school. So if you ever come across them and you ask them for me and they say they don't know me, they're probably pranking, because we do that a lot. So let's turn to why we're here today. I am here to discuss with you this whole issue of being burnt out at work. We're going to talk a bit about the current situation. We're going to speak about what burnout is, how it's different from other conditions, what makes it unique and special. And we're going to take a deep dive into what you can do as an employee to alleviate the symptoms of burnout, to get out of them if you're there, to prevent them from occurring in the first place. And we'll also touch on what organizations, what management and what organizations can do to alleviate burnout in the workplace. So sit back. If you're watching this live, get something to eat, remain hydrated, and let's jump into this together. Let's talk about the current situation first. A recent survey was done by the McKinsey Institute. If you're not familiar with them, and you're interested in research, you definitely should become familiar with them. They're fantastic. They do great work. And the work was summarized in an article called The Surprising State of Employee Health. It's on McKinsey's website. If anyone wants to get the exact link afterwards, I can provide that to you. What they did was that they surveyed a number of employees, mainly across the United States, and they asked certain questions with respect to how employees perceive their health, how employees perceive the working environment that they're in, the reasons for their state of health, and so on. And they found some very interesting facts. The first interesting fact I want to draw your attention to, they found that around half, actually, I think it was 57% of employees in the workplaces that they surveyed describe themselves as being healthy, which means that roughly 43 to 50%, I think my maths is still good, would have described themselves as unhealthy. And of that, approximately 50%, they would have described the workplace as being one of the causes of their lack of good health. The survey also found that the youngest workers, those within the 18 to 35 bracket, were more likely to report being burnt out than older workers. Now that is something that you can take a deep dive into and analyze all on its own. Why exactly younger workers perceive themselves as being more burnt out, but that is not the reason why we are here today. That's a topic for another discussion. But just hold on to younger workers were more likely to report being burnt out than older workers. At the same time, working longer, that is, having a longer career, is actually correlated better with holistic health. Again, that's another tidbit that we could go into, but we're not here to do that today. Just hold on to the idea that there is a role and a place for work within our health, within our overall health. Sometimes we think of health only in terms of physical health and, well, more lately, mental health. But what we spend our time doing, where we spend that time, and with whom also accounts for a large part of our overall health across our lifespan. So hold on to that idea as well. In terms of reasons for burnout, the top predictor of burnout for the youngest generation is toxic workplace behavior. Toxic workplace environment, toxic habits, relationships, decision-making, ways of communication, all under the whole umbrella of toxic workplace behavior. It is significant to note that the younger generation identified toxic workplace behavior as the top predictor of burnout. Not the amount of work that they have to do, not the complexity of that work, not the challenge of getting that work done, but the behavior within the workplace. Top predictor. And at the same time, something that we have known for a long time and which we still hold on to very dearly, particularly in my profession, a healthy workforce is a productive workforce. So we have some somewhat contradictory things coming out of this survey. Well, not so much contradictory, but there are some dependencies. For example, working longer is correlated with ill health, but toxic workplace behavior leads to burnout. Okay? A healthy workforce is a driver of productivity, but toxic workplaces are impacting people and causing them to feel burnt out. So this represents the current situation within the workplace at this point in time. So what exactly is burnout? Why is burnout seen as something different from other mood disorders or other conditions? What makes it special? What makes it unique? Let's jump into that for a few minutes. Let's define burnout first of all. Burnout is defined as a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. Let me pause and talk about a couple of the words and phrases used in this brief but powerful definition. Burnout is described as a state. A state is different from a mood, a day, a week, varying moods like up and down, feeling one way in the morning, a different way in the afternoon, one way today, one way tomorrow. No, it's a state. And think of a state as a steady state. So not changing, not wavering, constant and consistent. So burnout is different from feeling burnt out on a particular day or a particular week. It is a prolonged state. It carries on for a while, okay? And persons who are burnt out tend to feel physically tired, tend to feel emotionally tired, and mentally exhausted. It is caused by prolonged stress. So not one stressor, not a stressor for a day or for a project or for a week, but over a period of time. Okay, I hope I'm getting this message across that burnout is different from a depressive episode, it's different from a bad mood, it's different from having a bad week, it's different from doubting yourself. It represents a state. Some of the symptoms of burnout include no enthusiasm and feelings of negativity towards your job. Now, lots of people feel negative towards their job for lots of reasons. You may not like the boss that you work for. You may not like your co-workers. A person may be dissatisfied with their remuneration, their pay, their benefits, and so forth, conditions of work. But we're speaking about something that is beyond just being unhappy with your current job. This is like if you think of a line, and if you think of 0 point being the point where I am neutral with respect to my job, this is in the negative. This goes beyond not liking my job. This is actually having negativity and no enthusiasm for your job whatsoever. Another symptom is feeling constantly tired or exhausted. So even when outside of work, even when in places where a person would normally be comfortable and would normally have energy, with friends, with family, doing hobbies, spending time doing things that they enjoy doing, this feeling of constant tiredness or exhaustion stays. And ultimately, burnout is characterized by an inability to perform your job. So all of these symptoms collude, and the end result is the burnt out employee cannot do their job. They can't concentrate. They make lots of mistakes. They spend lots of time maybe daydreaming. There's a term for that called presenteeism, which really is like being home, but the lights are off. The lights are on, or the lights are on, nobody's home. It really means that you're there, but you're not mentally there. You're not doing anything. You're not present. And presenteeism, along with these other symptoms, characterize burnout. The key things that I want you to take away from the definition of burnout are, one, that it's a state. It's not a mood. It's not a day. It's not a period. It's a state. It's a total state. The person is in that state constantly, and it is as a result of prolonged stress. And I would say prolonged, unaddressed stress, because stress can be addressed. That's why we're having this conversation today. But just allowing stress to do what it does unfettered, unchecked, leads to this prolonged state where people become burnt out. The good news is there are techniques for managing burnout. There are things that you can do that will alleviate symptoms of burnout. There are things that you can do that will prevent, in many cases, symptoms of burnout. There are things that you can do that will help you to become resilient. And resilient is where you want to be. And I'll tell you why. You are going to face challenges and stresses of one kind or another throughout your working life. The very definition of work implies stress. So there are always going to be stresses. What you want to do is to inoculate yourself or make yourself immune to as many of those stresses as possible. Sometimes in enthusiasm to teach people about stress management and burnout prevention and so on, people emphasize the tools and the techniques that you can use to combat if stress that is in effect or in operation at the moment. But I'm proposing something a little bit different to you. I'm proposing that what you really want to do is to become as resilient as possible, so you spend less time and less energy fighting the symptoms of stress. It's like facing arrows coming at you without a shield. You maybe have some tool or the other that you're using to sort of pad the arrows and push them away. That would be trying to manage your stress on a continuous basis. Having a big shield that prevents the majority or all of the arrows from getting to you in the first place is what resilience is. And being resilient is both a choice as well as it is, I would consider, a lifestyle. It's an approach towards life. It's an approach towards things that you don't like, things that worry you, things that potentially stress you, that will help you to keep those levels of stress at bay. And that's what you want to aim for. So we're going to talk now about the things that you can do. And we're going to spend, I think, the majority of the time here now talking about the things that you can do to prevent stress. But let me warn you. Two things. One, I never said it's going to be easy. Okay? First disclaimer. So after I've told you what I have to tell you next, don't say, but Mr. Joseph, that's very hard to do. Because I'm telling you up front that it is hard to do. But as students and as graduates of the Great Howard University, you already know that anything worth your while is hard and it takes effort. So I am preaching to the choir. You are people who know and appreciate the value of hard work and who understand and appreciate that nothing worthwhile in life comes without effort. Even if you bought a lotto ticket, you had to get to the lotto center or you had to do something in order to purchase it. It's not going to just come to you, all right? It's just a little aside, but you get my point. Second thing is, some of the things I'm going to tell you may sound strange at first, but I ask you to think about them carefully. Let them roll around in your mind for a while. In some cases, maybe even to sleep on it. And I'm certain that the wisdom and the power of what I'm about to tell you will resonate and will ring true for you. Okay? So with all of that drama, let me pull back the curtains and tell you the first really, really important thing that I want you to know about burnout and about managing burnout. In the West Indies, in the Caribbean, where I live, our grandparents, or in some cases our parents, made sure that as children, we got to know a prayer called the Serenity Prayer. I'm sure you've seen it before. Sometimes in our parents' or grandparents' homes, it would be on a plaque or, mounted in a frame on the wall or somewhere. And the prayer goes very simply, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, it's a nice prayer, and it really makes a nice ornament to put on a wall. But whether you believe in prayer or not, there are three profound truths that particular set of lines, that particular verse speaks to. One, there are some things in life that you can't change. Okay? There are some things in life that you can't change. Two, there are some things you can change, but it requires courage. And three, and this one is my favorite of the three lessons, it takes wisdom to discern the things you can change from the things you cannot change. Now, I thought about this for a while, and I put it into a form. I felt like, this is potentially very useful for me, beyond just a prayer that I could pray and ask my Creator to provide divine illumination and inspiration. I felt that this was something that I could use. I could actually put it into effect and use powerfully and effectively in my daily life. So I came up with what I call the serenity mindset. You might see somebody else call it something else differently. That's fine. Wisdom comes from many different sources, but I call it the serenity mindset. And how I apply this in my own life and what I teach people who ask me is, every single time something worries you, stresses you out, bothers you, upsets you, makes you lose sleep, makes you want to say words that we can't say in a forum like this, ask yourself one question. Is this something I can actually change? Okay? Not, is this something I want to change? Not, is this something I wish could change? Not something, is this something I think should change? Is this something I can actually change? You're going to find that when you ask yourself that question, the answer is going to be either yes or no. If you ask yourself that question and your response to yourself is in between, you haven't delved deeply enough, or you haven't framed the question clearly enough so that a clear answer emerges. Because there's always a yes or a no. The nuances of that yes or no is what determines your approach to it. So if you ask yourself, for example, in my country, we have a lot of road traffic, okay? At certain times in the day, because we're a relatively small geographic area, but there's lots of cars. People own cars, right? Generally, households will have 2, 3, sometimes more cars because they're, well, up to now, relatively affordable. We do have general elections for a new government on Monday coming. So, that's why I'm looking up in the air and making little side comments about it. But it's still generally affordable, okay? And daily traffic is something that most citizens have to contend with, okay? Once you're leaving your home to go somewhere. So I don't like traffic. I don't know if you like traffic, but I hate traffic. If I were to ask myself, is traffic something that I can actually change? My answer is a very clear no. I do not possess powers of being able to physically lift cars and vehicles out of the way so that I can pass. I do not drive an emergency vehicle that has lights and a siren that will allow the traffic to clear like the parting of the Red Sea. There is nothing that I can do to stop, prevent, or remove traffic. So if I use the questions that you see on the slide in front of you, is this something that I can actually change? My response is no. So what do I have to do? Either adapt to it, or find some way to accept it. And the way that I adapt to it is to leave home earlier. If I can set meetings for a time that is outside of the traffic period, outside of the rush hour, I do that. I can do everything in my power to avoid getting into those traffic periods. If I were to fool myself and think that I could change it, I would end up sitting in traffic, arguing, quarreling, stewing, raising my blood pressure, making myself upset, raising my cortisol levels, becoming more stressed, damaging my arteries, damaging my heart, all of those things that we don't want to do. But I recognize it's something I can't do anything about. I can't change. Not that I can't do anything about, something that I can't change. So I find a way to adapt to it. Okay. The thing with when you find that your response is, yes, this is something I can change, it often takes grit, determination, courage, effort, discipline, consistency in order to effect those changes. So that's why sometimes people run away from making changes. You're in a bad relationship, for example. You've been in it for a while. Your friends, your family, people around you have told you directly and indirectly, you're in a bad relationship. This person that you have partnered with is bad for you. And you know deep down inside, the person is bad for me. What do I do? Is this something I can change? Yes, I can. Is it easy to change? Usually isn't. So that's where the courage, grit, determination, and consistency comes in. Okay. So why is this important to the workplace, and why is this important to burnout? It's important because identifying your sources of burnout in the workplace, you will be able to ask yourself the same question. Is this something I can change, or is this something that I can't change? More likely than not, there will be some elements of the causes of burnout that you can change. More likely than not, there will be some elements of those causes that you cannot change. It is critically important, my friends, that you recognize and be able to discern the difference between the things you can change and the things that you cannot change. If you think of what stress is, there are some common conditions around stress. Stress is always caused by something that we don't like, that we either can't or find very difficult to change. If you sit down at a desk and there's a paper napkin on the desk in front of you and you don't like the paper napkin, you move it. It's very easy to move. So it's unlikely that that is going to stress you out. If you sat down at the same desk and there was a 100-pound rock, let's say, in front of you, it might stress you out a little bit because that's a bit harder to move, okay? Don't tell me you've been working out on 100 pounds. It's not hard for you to move, okay? That's not the point of what I'm saying. Stay with me, okay? You got to figure out what is stressing you out about the workplace, first of all, what is causing you to feel burnt out. And you got to ask yourself this brutally honest question, whether this is something I can change or whether this is something I cannot change. And depending on the response, you take action accordingly. And this applies to your workplace, as well as this applies to other areas of your life. Let me give you a quick story about applying this principle to the workplace. It may surprise you after listening to me for half an hour, assuming you're still there, which I think you are. It may surprise you to know that my undergraduate degree is actually in computer science and management. Yeah. When I left high school, I entered a local university, local college, and I did a degree in computer science and management. Did pretty well. I got what we call an upper second class honor degree, which is just below a first class degree. I did well. And when I graduated, I got a good job. And then I got a better job and a better job. And eventually I landed up in a company called IBM. You might know it. And I worked in IBM in Trinidad. While working on projects at IBM, I had the fortune of being able to work with colleagues from IBM in Toronto, Canada. And always being ambitious and wanting to get ahead and, having a very young family at the time, I thought to myself, I wonder if there are any opportunities in IBM Toronto where I can grow. So I asked, because that's what you do when you want things to happen. You open your mouth and you speak. As somebody said, I can't remember where I saw it last week, closed mouths do not get fed. Okay? Closed mouths do not get fed. You have to open your mouth. So I asked, and lo and behold, the response was, sure, we have vacancies. Send me your resume, which I did. So I transferred to IBM in Toronto, and I worked there for a number of years. Toronto was a wonderful experience, great place, too cold for me. I couldn't last. So after about 3 years, myself and my young family, we moved back to Trinidad. Of course, coming back to Trinidad, having the Toronto experience, I was now in a better place and was able to get an even better job than I had before. So I was in a middle management position at a local bank and doing well. But guess what was happening while all of this progress was taking place? I was becoming increasingly unhappier. And it got to the point where I was burnt out and I could not figure out for the life of me why. I was doing work that was supposed to have been interesting. I was making a decent amount of money. My health was good enough. I was supposed to be happy. But yet still, when Sunday evening rolled around, when it got to about 5 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, I would start getting headachy, nauseous, cramping up, feeling sad, feeling withdrawn, not feeling to speak to anyone or see anyone. Sunday evenings became a very depressing time for me. And when I couldn't take it anymore, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have this webinar to explain what burnout is. I'm not even sure if we had a name for it then, but anyway, I went and I spoke to someone, a counselor. Never had done that before. And they were able to help me see that I was in fact burnt out and that I needed to do something about it. So I addressed the question of whether this is something I could change or not directly or indirectly. And the response was yes. And guess what the response was? Well, you know the end of the story. So, you know, I'm kind of giving you a backstory here. The end result was I needed to switch careers. Can you imagine reaching a fairly good stage in your current career, having gone through, you know, having gained a degree and gained years of experience, worked in 2 different countries, being faced with the daunting task of having to change careers? That's where the courage, grit, determination, consistency comes in. So to cut a long story short, I did. I got through, as we say in Trinidad, and here I am today. It takes courage. I'm not suggesting that where you are right now within your studies or within your chosen career that you may need to switch. I'm simply saying that burnout can happen to anyone, whether you are well-intentioned, even the well-intentioned, it can happen to anyone, but there's always something that you can do about it. Good? So, serenity mindset, that's number 1. You think that was the difficult one or that was the challenging one. Wrong. What if I told you that everything you experience, your life, the circumstances you find yourself in, the places you find yourself in, the people around you, the relationships you have, everything that you know, everything that is the sum, makes the sum total of your experience of life. What if I told you that what you experience as reality around you is not really reality, but it is the way your brain interprets reality? Would you say I'm just trying to sound like Morpheus from the Matrix? Or would you say that, you know, you're kind of onto something there? Or would you say, no, that is just mumbo jumbo? Okay. Your brain assimilates information through your senses, your eyes, your ears, taste, and so forth. Your brain also retains memories of things that have happened before. When your senses take in sights, sounds, etc., the environment, the situation that you're in, your brain looks for a memory that correlates with what you're experiencing right now. And it uses the memory to inform you where you are, what's happening, even how you should feel, what emotional state you should have. So that's why if you've been in a place that you don't like and you go somewhere that reminds you of the place that you don't like, that the feelings come back. The place itself is not putting feelings into you. Your mind is the one that controls that narrative. And that's why I say that what you experience as reality is really your brain's interpretation of that experience. And we'll see why that's important. The entire alcohol, drug, and tobacco industries rely on this particular premise, because what do those substances do? They alter your brain's perception of your reality. And in an altered state, your emotions follow. So you feel carefree. You think that your off-key, bad singing is in tune and the most soulful that mankind has ever heard. You think that everybody around loves you and wants to be with you and wants to ensure that you have a good time. Obviously, you're going to feel very happy and you're going to feel like this is the greatest time ever. Your brain's perception of your reality has been altered. I'm also going to tell you that your brain can be trained to reframe your experience. It is not out of your control to teach your brain how to rewire itself so that you experience certain realities differently. You may have heard the term neuroplasticity. It simply refers to your brain's wonderful ability to rearrange neural connections so that it thinks and it processes information that comes from your senses in a way that's different from how it was before. That is the heart of learning. And that learning can be extended to how we perceive the environment around us. I also want to tell you that it's worth the time and effort to understand neuroplasticity, understand that your brain interprets your environment, and to use this information to make life a little better for yourself. How does this apply to burnout? This all sounds very interesting, I imagine, but how does this apply to burnout? Sometimes the things that stress you out and burn you out is really a result of how you view them, of how you think about them, of how you've experienced them in the past. And reframing those events and circumstances differently can lead to a drop in the level of stress that you experience. You would have heard the expression, or you may have heard the expression attributed to a glass that is 50% filled with water. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? And the colloquial common saying is the optimist sees the glass as half full, expecting it to be 100% full at some point in the future, whereas the pessimist sees the glass as half empty, expecting it to be fully empty at some point in the future. The optimist thinks that things are not going to get better. The pessimist thinks that things are going to get better. That's a simple analogy, but it explains how two different people with two different mindsets are experiencing the same glass of water in very different ways. One anticipates more, one anticipates less. Guess which one is more likely to go home feeling defeated, hopeless, sad, and depressed? Now, I'm not saying that we need to giddily look at everything stressful in our lives and tell ourselves it's a half full glass and things are going to get better. That would be unrealistic. There's some things that are not going to get better. But there are some things that are, and there are some things that could. And if we get too bogged down in looking at things through purely negative lenses, seeing things as always getting worse, our brains are going to become hardwired to experience life in very negative ways. And that's going to end up being the story of our lives. So understanding that what we see and what we experience is really our brain's interpretation and understanding of it, and examining whether we can actually learn how to reframe and change the way we look at certain things and that this will lead to a better experience for us, is potentially life-saving or life-giving if we could embrace and understand it. Food for thought. So between the serenity mindset and this concept of your brain interpreting your experience and giving you something that it tells you is reality. Between these two concepts, these two ideas, learning how to properly master them and work with them and incorporate them into your daily lives can build up a significant amount of resilience and a significant ability to withstand the things that stress you on a daily basis. Now, you notice I am not describing the things that distress you in the workplace, because for each person in each setting, it is different. What I'm emphasizing is the commonality of the solutions for all of them. And I'm saying that at the heart of everything that you do, if you develop the serenity mindset, and if you learn how to reframe your situations and circumstances in ways that are more positive and more life-giving, that you are already winning the battle against being burnt out and against being overly stressed. And when you do those things, and when you master those things, all of these other tools and techniques that you see on social media and on television and that you read about in books, you now have, or you now give them a good chance to be effective. Things like mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is really the art of keeping your focus in the present. Not dwelling on the past and what happened, not trying to use the past to predict the future, but remaining present, remaining here, remaining now. Someone, you're all students, or you have been. When you're in an exam, you need to be mindful. You need to be present. You need to be there. If in the midst of an exam, your mind is thinking about what you're going to eat when you get home later, or what you're doing over the weekend, or the bad argument that you had with your friend last week, you're probably not going to do your best in the exam because you're not present. If you're an athlete, let's say you're a sprinter, and you're at the starting line of a race, and you're waiting for the gun to go off to signal the start, and you're thinking about a television program that you want to see when you get home, chances are you will miss the starter's gun and you've lost the race. So we all do mindful or practice mindful behavior at different points in our lives, but it's usually when we're forced to do it. Practicing mindfulness, whether it is individually, whether it is in a group, whether it is in, no matter what the setting, learning the art of mindfulness brings us to the point where we can remain present anytime, whenever we want. And being mindful alleviates a lot of the stress and worry, because stress and worry always comes from memories of stressful things in the past and projections about present and future stress. The past and the future are always intertwined in stress in some way. But being mindful, being focused on the solution, being focused on doing what you have to do in the present moment is a huge alleviator of stress. And that can assist greatly with mitigating against burnout. So learning mindfulness, whether you're learning mindfulness meditation on your own or with a guided tour or with an app or something, definitely a tool that you need to put in your toolkit. Once you're already mastering the serenity mindset, and once you're already learning how to reframe and look at your life and circumstances in more productive and positive ways. Utilizing, when you get into the workplace, time effectively. A lot of times people in the workplace get overwhelmed because there's a lot to do and resources are very thin. And along with some of the added worries and complexities of the modern workforce, one of the most recent, unfortunately, being for many employees of the government, worry and concern as to whether you even have a job. Getting overly focused on the volume and complexity of things that you have to do can lead to a sort of a panic stepping in and an inability. What happens when you panic is that you actually begin shutting down and unable to get what you have to get done. All right. So learning time management techniques, learning how to prioritize tasks based on the impact or the severity of impact of them. That is taking care of things that have an immediate impact, things that have a slightly delayed impact, and leaving behind things that have little negligible impact for later on or at a different point in time. Learning how to prioritize your tasks and learning how to spend time on them that is effective is a key skill that you can use to help alleviate the stress associated with work. Setting realistic deadlines for yourself. This is one of the ways that we tie ourselves up all the time. Something that is going to take, let's say, 2 hours to complete. You promise your coworker or your boss that you'll get it done in 15 minutes. Congratulations, you have just stressed yourself out. It is far better to over-deliver by telling people, if you know it's going to take 2 hours, well, it's going to take 4. And then delivering way before that time. It is also better for you to set deadlines in your own mind in the same manner, realistically, and giving yourself enough time to get things done. This is going to be challenging at times because there are going to be forces pushing you to get things done within a certain time frame. But the key is to be honest with yourself and to figure out how much time you actually need to get things done and not to put undue pressure on yourself to perform a task in an unrealistic time frame. So time management. The importance of taking breaks between work cannot be underestimated or understated. The human mind, like any other machine, can work only in spurts. It needs to rest. It gets tired. It gets worn out. It requires rejuvenation. I have heard of some workplaces where, for example, meetings begin in the morning and are expected to continue nonstop until night. I do not know which area of human study or which area of human achievement or endeavor is attributed to working nonstop for 12, 13, 14 hours without taking any sort of break between. The human brain, as far as science can tell, and as far as our experience can tell, works in blocks of time, in spurts. So you need to take breaks from time to time. Learning when you need to take those breaks and for how long and fitting that in to your overall available time is something that you need to figure out and master. For some people, taking 5 minutes is enough for the brain juices to start flowing. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. People vary. The time of day as well can also impact what your needs are and how you need to manage and use that time effectively, okay? But nevertheless, taking breaks are important. And I want to caution you from feeling or giving into the feeling that taking a break is somehow not being productive and not getting things accomplished. Far from the truth. Taking a break is necessary to get things accomplished. All right. So those things that I've just described to you would address what you need to do as an employee to help alleviate burnout, symptoms of it, to help prevent symptoms of burnout, to prevent yourself from even becoming burnt out. Those are the tools that you are encouraged to work with, become familiar with, and use to become more resilient and to prevent yourself from becoming burnt out, or if you're feeling the symptoms of burnout, to get out of it, okay? There are some more things that I will describe now, but these things talk more about the workplace itself, what the workplace can do, the environment it can be in, what the environment can be, how the environment can be configured, let's say, all right? So these may not necessarily apply to you directly, but they can assist you when you become a manager or someone in charge of a workplace, or even in figuring out the kind of place you'd like to work, okay? Fostering open communication among colleagues. Far too many times within the workplace, people don't talk. People don't understand what's required of them. Things happen and other people are not informed about it. Dependencies are not properly described and explained and so on. So having a very open communication system about what's happening, and especially about changes within the workplace, helps to create a better and more productive and less toxic workplace. Managers can create mentorship programs for junior staff, where junior staff can get the assistance of someone who's been there longer to kind of guide them through and teach them the ropes and help them overcome many of the challenges that they would have to face and take all of the knocks on their own on themselves. Employees respond well when there are opportunities for growth. You don't want to have gone through these years of study to graduate and then get into a position that you feel is stagnant. So creating opportunities for growth is another one of those things that good workplaces have and that you should look for when you're looking for a place of employment. A culture of work-life balance. I cannot stress this one enough either. They're all important points, all right? Any workplace that expects people to just come in, drop life, and work nonstop is not a place that you want to be at, quite frankly. And workplaces that want to be productive and that want to get the best out of its employees need to create cultures that support work-life balance. Things like flexible working arrangements, flexible times, and, well, there's been a whole thing about working remotely versus working in office. I'm not going to go into it, but the science is out there to describe what works and what doesn't work. Encouraging breaks and time off, and of course, recognizing and celebrating accomplishments. These things all go along with a work-life culture that supports work-life balance, which is extremely important and something you should be looking out for. In terms of longer-term initiatives that workplaces can implement in order to keep its employees productive and not burnt out, would include things like developing resilience training for employees. Now, I work within, as I said in the beginning, the employee assistance program world. And for those of you who don't know, an employee assistance program is a company program, let's say, that addresses workplace and employee issues that challenge productivity, both workplace as well as employee issues. It is one of the tools that an employer can use to ensure that issues that can't be addressed by the workplace can be addressed by the services provided under an employee assistance program, all right? And one of those things might very well be resilience training, the type of thing that I'm doing here now, and other programs that teach people how to master the things that weigh them down, the things that make them stressed out, the things that affect their productivity. And forms of resilience training is one of those really, really critical and important elements. That's why I chose to discuss resilience first, because like I said, prevention is better than cure. It is far better to learn how to prevent yourself from becoming burnt out than to get yourself out of being burnt out when you're there already, all right? Encouraging a focus on mental wellness in the workplace. I think, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, so there's no need for me to explain why this is important. But if we don't get by now that the brain is an organ and it is just as important as the heart, the liver, the spleen, and all of the others, I don't know when we're going to get that if we don't get it now, all right? So mental health and a focus on mental health and the ability to deal with and treat with mental health issues, also very important and critical to a good, healthy, productive workforce. All right. And along with everything else, promoting team collaboration and enhancing support systems. Burnout is real. Burnout happens to people. Burnout can happen to anybody. And when people are burnt out, they can't be productive. So workplaces learning how to put measures in action to prevent burnout is not just something wise or something good to do. It should be strategically relevant. And in your journey throughout your careers, look for workplaces that embody these values and that have these attributes. Okay. So to bring everything together, to summarize, burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. That's where we started. Young workers are more likely to experience and report symptoms of burnout. So young people, 18 to 35, you are the target demographic for worker stress and for burnout. Please be aware of that. The good news is burnout is both preventable as well as reversible. Think tools, think mindset, think serenity mindset, think reframing, refocusing, looking at things differently. Think about mindfulness, think about self-care. Think about the type of workplace that you want to be working at as well. What are its values? What is its culture? Does it support your needs for yourself and your own mental and emotional health, or does it go against those things? Organizations can intentionally mitigate against burnout. Culture, processes, habits, style. My friends, be intentional about resilience. Don't let or allow resilience to be something that either develops and grows in you or doesn't. Take responsibility for it. Figure out your triggers. Figure out your pain points. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask for help and to go for help where help is available. It is worth the effort. It is worth the time. Get it done. Thank you very much for being present here today and for taking the time to review this webinar. I hope that I have been informative. I hope that I have been instructive. I hope that you get something from this time that we've spent together that can assist you in your working career and in your life in general. Please either use the link or the QR code that you see on screen now to access the evaluation form for this webinar. And please make sure and give your honest feedback on it. Honest feedback, we spoke a lot about communication within teams and so on. Honest feedback is the only way that we can improve these webinars and give you more value, more of what you want and more of what you need. So it's important, take a couple minutes just to do this. Thank you very much again, and I look forward to meeting with you again at some point in the future. Take care. Have a great day.